Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone seated? Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. We're delighted. We broadcast 2 hours every day, 9 o'clock in the morning through 11 o'clock in the morning, Central Time. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm doing much, much, much better. And I'll tell you why. Yesterday, I was on the phone with CenturyLink, which is also known as CenturyTel, which is the worst telephone provider in the galaxy. And our telephone bill went up 28%. So,
oh, my gosh.
Well, they keep doing it, you know. I think their motto... I haven't read this anywhere, but I think the motto for CenturyLink is poor quality at higher prices. I think that's their corporate motto. But anyway, I called yesterday, and I wanted to talk with the customer retention department. And this is, class, please pay attention to this. You can lower your phone bill, and if you have satellite TV, and most bills except for the ones that are fully automated, like Netflix, you won't be able to reduce that. But maybe your cable, maybe your satellite television, maybe your phone bill, by just placing a call asking for customer retention. That telephone number is hidden. You will not be able to look up that number. But once you go through the automated prompts and you keep hitting 00000 or 00000, I should say O for operator, or you say operator, or agent, or customer service, they'll ultimately get you to a person. Then you explain that you'd like to continue with their service, but it's hard to justify because the price keeps going up. And you'll get in touch with a specialist whose job it is to offer you one incentive at a time to keep you from jumping ship or cutting the cord with them. And what I did yesterday was I had this really sweet gal, and she was on the East Coast. And I explained to her that, I just couldn't justify the high cost of this telephone service and internet. And so the gap is increasing. What she did was she offered me discounts. But it's not having any. And let me tell you what our discounts are. And if you look at engineering, it's even more stark. So these discounts usually last for 6 months, maybe some of them a year, but they keep expiring, and they keep expiring at different times. So our bill keeps going up and down, like every month. Well, I think you have to look at this. So here's what I have. I have a loyalty credit of $10. So they reduced my bill by $10. Then I have another loyalty credit of $5. Then I have a loyalty discount of $10. Then I have a promotional discount of $2, and I have another promotional discount of $10. So I have all of these discounts because I just asked for them. And you can too. So if you're paying $100 for your phone service, you can get it down into roughly the $50 neighborhood, maybe the $60 neighborhood, by just asking and saying, is there anything else you can do? And then when we're done with the phone call, or almost, well, during the early part of the phone call, she said, I'm going to have to put you on hold. I'll be right back. She came right back. She said, I'm sorry for putting you on hold. So naturally, I know that she's timed And they've got a meter running to figure out how long the average call is for her. Because if she's too slow, they're going to beat her up. If she's too fast, they may say, atta girl, and no raise or anything, just say, atta girl. So what I do is I say, when they come back and say they're sorry for putting me on hold, I say, well, it's okay. That's no problem. I've got all day for you. I've taken the rest of the day off for this phone call.
Probably neither.
That's the last thing they want to hear, because that means I may have more questions, and they want to, so they cut right to the chase, and they start offering all the discounts they can.
Do you think
that's the strategy?
That a relationship and you have more sex,
and it works.
Your income will go up?
And it absolutely works. So I have minus 10, minus 5, minus 10, minus 2, and minus 10 on our phone bill. In class, you can do the same thing. So the minute you see your phone bill go up,
people who have that trait
call them up.
Have more sex.
And then at the end of the call, I said, oh, and what can you do about lowering our phone bill? It just went up.
But suddenly you
because these discounts would take effect next month.
And they all say,
for one time, I can reduce it and bring it back to where it was. So that's how I did it. So I just want to share that with the class. Any comments, Glenn?
All we have is a correlation.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I don't know that our telephone monopoly around here does anything similar, unfortunately.
So at Social Justice U,
because they
if a group is underrepresented, it
I don't know. They're just, well, for one thing, they happen to be owned by the government.
That is what you learn.
So it's not like that they have private shareholders that they have to give an account to, because no matter what happens, they can always put their hand out for the government. So it doesn't really matter if they keep customers or not under such circumstances, because it's not like that they have to make money.
I want you all
they
to say
just do.
Right now.
Does that make sense?
1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Does not
in
government
way.
Government employees, except for maybe the
doesn't have to be efficient.
Right, except for maybe the collectors of revenue, like those who set the rates, and maybe the police. Those who are in the business of getting money, they might have some kind of incentive to do a better job from the government's perspective, the government corporation's perspective. But in terms of earning a profit,
by all means, look more closely.
I don't know of any government agency that is measured on profit. And they are in the business of making money. There's no question about it. That's why the police are hiding and sniping at the end of the month, because they have to do better in their ticket contest. They have to catch up with Daryl or Tommy or whoever was the leader last month in terms of tickets.
Who was selected?
Yeah. Weren't you saying something about them having black cars?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, I was filling up one day, getting gasoline for one of our gas-powered vehicles, and there was this brand new SUV, big, expensive SUV.
They've been trying since the 90s.
So in my best Columbo, I walked over to the guy, and he was like the chief of the police of that little city. He happened to be traveling into Springfield, Missouri. He's from the St. Louis area. And I said, wow, that really is something. Like, I was impressed with, this piece of machinery that the taxpayers and the people who got tickets paid for. And he said, yeah, it's called the Blackout Edition. I said, wow, that's really hard to see. He goes, yeah, it's really hard to see. Wow, that's really something. And he was like bragging about how this is he didn't use the word sniper vehicle, but that's what he was saying. This is a really cool sniper vehicle. And we had to order it specially because, to get it so you can't see it, you have to pay extra for that. And he was really proud of this big, black, imposing, aggressive-looking SUV that probably cost $80,000. I'm thinking easily. That's before it was, equipped with all the Dumaflachis that they have in there. Like the concealed radar and the concealed lighting and the extra comfortable seats, to make sure that these parasites are comfortable.
Everybody should agree.
While they're assaulting us.
If people are treated differently because they are black or gay,
so in a little hamlet just outside of Springfield a couple days ago, they had the snipers out there, hiding. And so, of course, I'm afraid for their safety. I'm concerned about their safety. So I warn everybody coming their way. The opposing traffic, I warn everybody with my headlights. I flash them, like flash, just to make sure. Well, I don't want anybody to get hurt. Especially, they might not see these guys. They might run into them. So to keep the police safe, I let everybody know that the police are there.
The Department of Education began prosecuting Title IX offenses.
Yep. I'll tell you what, when I was Lady Catherine Ferris, there was a reason why I chose black horses
suspended more often than girls.
For my work.
It's often 10 to 1 or more.
Because they're hard to see.
And so the Bush administration thought, this is unfair.
That's exactly
this is a violation of Title IX.
I chose.
You didn't see me coming until I was right there.
And so they told schools that they
I don't have any
eliminate
black horses, but I do have black cows.
And so what are they going to do? Well, what are they going to do?
Well, that's a problem because we have people now who are shooting cows in the road.
So if the girl does anything wrong,
for fun.
we have to suspend her.
They shoot cows, they shoot groundhogs, they shoot armadillos, they shoot foxes, they shoot coyotes. They shoot birds off power lines. It's nuts.
They have many more externalizing disorders. They commit more violent crimes.
People have absolutely gone crazy.
We know that boys violate.
I live in the Wild West out here. I would prefer the Wild West to a city.
The goal is to make the suspension rates the same.
People are really nuts. They throw their trash out the windows, when they're traveling, because they know someone else will pick it up. But the bad thing is, people who spit their gum out. That's just one little bad thing. People who spit their gum out the window, they don't realize, maybe they're just too stupid to realize that maybe a bird might eat that and think it's food and die. So just because they're so careless, so unconcerned with reality that they just spit their gum out. I object to that. I object to people throwing their cigarette butts out. And I've told the story on the air that I had a student who had come to our shop where I volunteered to teach a class in computer science after school to students who were interested. I just said, if you want to come, I'll teach you. And this one guy would get out of his car right in front of our shop entrance on our farm in Virginia. He'd get out and he'd smash his cigarette butt into our driveway day after day. And it bothered me because I got to pick them all up. I had a student so I saved my trash can for him. I volunteered. And when all the students were in class, I just walked out the door with my trash can and I emptied out in his car to show him what it was like. Nobody could believe I did that. He never did it again. We'll be right back.
Police or former police that I actually have the time of day for. I know a few, but not many. The few that I do know are absolutely sterling, solid gold guys. They really are.
I have a feeling this gentleman got himself into some hot water because he went after an official, an elected official. He went after him for a crime. And so, like the rest of us, I believe he's been punished. Now, I've offered him time on the air. Come and tell us, whatever he wants to tell us about the police business. But he prefers to not come on the air. Mark in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Guineith Isaacs.
Yeah, good morning. Boy, you must have said something because you're really getting a lot of chatter. There's like you got 3-4 voices coming over. Isn't that called harassment?
No, wait, hold on. Are you saying you're hearing the same thing too?
Oh yeah. It's just like they're, I know that they've done this to other people. I don't think this is just paranoia. But the word paranoia means that you're on the alert. It means that you got your eyes open and you're on the alert.
Okay, so Jason, if you could check this out. We've had this before. Okay, Jason just fixed it. Jason, thank you so much. And by the way, Jason's our engineer. This has happened before, and if you could tell me during the break what it is, so if I hear it and someone besides you is engineering, I can say, oh yeah, Jason found the problem and here's what it is. All you have to do is do this. So I appreciate that, Jason. So it's fixed. So, Mark, please continue.
Oh, that's good. Okay. I was, I really couldn't hear what you were been talking about with Guineith, but one thing I wanted to bring up about 9/11 was that I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I sold my house back in 2005, and when I did here in Illinois, I was living in my fifth wheel, and I happened to hear one day stuff that I'd moved. Some of the stuff, most of it, I moved into a place to hold it until I could sell everything off. But some of the stuff I brought into my fifth wheel and where I was living and traveling in, and I heard a beep, beep, beep. And I'm looking all over the trailer for this beep, beep, beep. And I find out it's my phone. It's a home phone that I had, and I take it all apart, and it's got a bug in it. And I realized, oh, okay, this is what I was hearing from all this double speak in my phone. And anyway, yeah, and so here's what the deal was, is that after 9/11 happened, I never watched the footage on TV at all concerning 9/11 because I just knew that it wasn't right. And this is what I said. This is why I got my phone bugged. But this is what I said. I said 9/11. I said the planes that hit the tower were not planes. It was three-dimensional hologram produced by lasers from satellite.
That's amazing. That's really, really interesting. But if you go back and look at the footage, it doesn't look right.
No, I've got to tell you that I've got some information about that. Right, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Mark, you were talking about the planes in 9/11. Would you mind continuing what you thought happened, please?
Yeah. Well, another thing very interesting is that in the 1980s, there was a project introduced in Boston, Massachusetts, to build an underground tunnel from Boston to New York City. And so this tunnel was like about 8 lanes. It's a big, massive tunnel operation. And as far as I know, they completed it before 9/11. The other thing is that that during Clinton administration, there was a bomb that went off on the 3rd floor underneath the Twin Tower building, where the president's mortar arcade was flown in by the Secret Service, and where that blew up the whole 3rd floor of the garage. You can go back and trace these things. Another thing that happened was that when on 9/11, there was these Zionists, that's just what I'm going to call them, 22 of them that were arrested. And it was really interesting because they were arrested they were on different buildings, different locations, kind of like forming a triangular with the Twin Towers. I think what they had was laser equipment that wasn't just cameras. They have appeared to look like a camera, but I think it was a triangular. They were part of this conspiracy to produce a 3-dimensional hologram. And another thing, too, is that you have to have sound. And so there was a guy named Bob Carver who was a NASA engineer who had a background in physics, a PhD in physics. He had 3 PhDs. He designed all of the components for the space shuttle with the type of engineering that he was involved in. He was an electrical engineer. He was a circuit engineer and a physicist. And he designed he designed what they call holography, which was 3-dimensional sound. So not only if you're going to produce a 3D hologram using laser, and this technology was developed in the 70s, but it wasn't late 70s, but it wasn't brought out to perfection until they really launched this whole conspiracy to fool everybody.
Well, here's what I know. I have a friend who lives in Virginia, and her son was working in an office complex in Richmond, Virginia. And a call came in from New York City, from one of the towers, to a coworker of my friend's son. And there was a father, the father of this coworker's friend, called his son and said, the tower had been hit. It's okay. I'm above the flames. It's okay. And during that phone call, the phone went dead, and the building disappeared.
Hey, I want to interject one more thing, too, and that is, I believe this was a bank heist. I believe the first tower had the mainframe in it for the banking system, because all of the Iranian assets that were frozen under the Jimmy Carter administration with the when the hostages were taken in Iran in 1979 under the Carter administration, all of the Iranian assets were frozen. They were in the Twin Towers. And so the first primary system, which the computer system, had to be taken out. And the second primary system, the secondary system of the mainframe, was in the second tower. So they had to take these mainframes out simultaneously in order to transfer the funds. And if you go back and look at a movie in 1999 that was John Travolta in it, it's kind of really mysterious because he was a Mossad agent in this movie, and it's about jacking into the mainframe of a computer system in a banking system and hijacking the funds, transferring them at all this precise timing.
Okay, here's what else I know. We had a computer business back then, and we had customers in all kinds of businesses. And at one of the businesses, and when I say customers, I mean I built the networks for these businesses. I would go into the businesses, I'd run the wire, connect the networks, teach the customers how to use their computers. And there's a lady there who I worked with, and her son was a steward, and his wife was a stewardess. And they decided that they were going to go on vacation and use their benefits of being airline employees so they could get on the same flight and be working on the flight while they were headed toward their destination, which would ultimately be Hawaii from the East Coast. And they were on the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, and they died. So what I'm saying is I know indirectly of a family who had a family member, a loved one, who was on one of those planes, was killed. I also know the story that I told you about the coworker of a young man whose father called. I also know that on that day that I received a phone call from a man named John, I'll just use his first name, and he worked at a school system where I was a consultant. And I got a phone call from him just after the attack on the Pentagon. After that airborne, whatever you want to call it, a missile plane, whatever it was, that landed on the Pentagon building and blew a hole in it. I got a call from this young man who I saw very often as a consultant, and he was in tears, and he said the Pentagon was just hit. My dad works in the Pentagon, and this man was a teacher at a school system.
Yeah, what was the location
I got
of
in
the Pentagon? Was it the vault, what they call the vault in the Pentagon?
That was the accounting department.
That.
You know, I'll say this just in case there's anybody listening. People ask me, they say, how do I know what I know? And I know this I don't mean this to sound arrogant or proud or nothing, but I know it because I'm a prophet, and God tells me things. He really does. And there's no way I could know these things unless God would tell me.
I'll tell you how I know that it was the accounting department. Okay? There's a fellow out there, and I would actually like to go into his life a little bit because he's got a very, very curious life and a very, very curious ancestry. Okay? His name is called Benjamin Fulford, and there's a lot of people out there who love to hate Benjamin Fulford, but some of the stuff that he said is not so, he is a bit strange. But with regards to his 9/11 work, it's pretty well spot on. And he is the one who pointed out that it was the accounting department that was struck in the Pentagon. So if there's anybody out there, and I'm sure we've got people from the Black Ops world who are listening to what we're saying, but don't get annoyed at me. Get annoyed at Benjamin Fulford. He's the one who said it. And the other thing is, it's really, really interesting that you're talking about a bank heist, because something else that Ben Fulford said was this. He said that there were shipments of gold that were being smuggled out of the basement of the World Trade Center. Okay? Like I said, this is not my information. This information's been out there for several years. Ben Fulford put it out. Okay? And I would like to go into his ancestry in a moment, Vincent, if you don't mind. But I'll just tell the story first, and then I'll go into his ancestry, because it's really quite interesting where he comes from. Oh my gosh, there were something like 12 weekly shipments of gold bullion that went out from the basement of the World Trade Center disguised in garbage barges. They have garbage barges in New York City to get rid of the city's trash, and apparently they just dump it in the Hudson River or offshore or somewhere. And but there were these barges would go like over the horizon, and then they would get picked up by ships and get taken somewhere. And there were 12 of these shipments out of the basement of the World Trade Center that were taken out and loaded onto a particular vessel, and then from there disappeared. And the origin of that gold was actually Nazi gold that was taken there after World War II, taken to New York City, and it ended up in the basement of the World Trade Center in an enormous vault. And it was after the 12th shipment had gone, that was on September the 11th, 2001, that I think that it was the week after that, after all the gold was gone out of the basement of the World Trade Center, that 9/11 happened. And in his opinion, at least part of what 9/11 was destruction of evidence. And it was interesting that the Pentagon accounting department was also destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about that. And there's another problem with the World Trade Center, asbestos, 400 tons of it. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and Mark in Illinois is with us. And as I was saying, the steward and stewardess that decided they were going to go on vacation arranged their schedule so they could be on one of the planes, and that plane crashed in Pennsylvania, and they died. And I really believe they did die on that flight, because I know the parent, the mother of one of them, and she was absolutely distraught. And when that happened, it ruined her career. She was unable to work for a long time. So those are the stories that I know about the World Trade Center, and also, I mean, from close to firsthand experience, not firsthand, but near that. And I also know that there was a lot of asbestos in the World Trade Center, about 400 tons of it. And if you think about the pictures that you've seen, class, of the what was left of the buildings that was on the ground, it's a lot of dust. A lot of dust. And there are some people who believe that one of the reasons that the World Trade Center was selected for this type of experiment or disaster or whatever you want to call it was because they had asbestos in the building and they could not get rid of it. They didn't know how to economically, viably get rid of all the 400 tons of asbestos in the structure. So maybe you put all that together. What are we going to do with this building? Well, we can just have the building go away. And that's what Dr. Judy Wood said. What happened to the buildings? They
Could I just
disappeared.
interject something real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, all the Iranian assets were frozen during the Jimmy Carter administration. Isn't it really peculiar that President Obama gave all of these funds back to Iran with interest?
Well, I didn't know that.
And okay, think about this. Just think about just pray about what I'm telling you. Think about it, because that's what I've done. And, and the Lord will, he's a God of truth. He'll show you all truth. I just want to tell you, it's a bank heist. This was a bank heist to hijack all of these, monies and to transfer them into digital accounts. Who knows how many they where they transferred them to? I don't know that information, but I do know that they jacked the system. This was a bank heist, and they had to take out the mainframe in the first tower, and they had to take out the second mainframe, but they had to do it simultaneously. And they used a hologram, three-dimensional hologram, with the laser, with holography as well, with the sound. So it looked so real that it would fool everybody.
Let's talk about mainframes for just a minute. I was a computer jockey for many years, and I worked for banks as a computer jockey. I was in charge of a computer system, and I was also in charge at another time in data communications. And I know a little bit about computer systems of that era, mainframes, as you mentioned. And I know what we did. In my department, since I was responsible for the hardware, the mainframe, if you will, we had redundancy. We had power backup systems. We actually had a motor generator type system that would take AC power and use a flywheel effect so that you'd have a motor running on the AC from the grid, and it would turn a flywheel. And then attached to the other end of that flywheel was a generator. So the idea was if there were irregularities in the power supply, that flywheel effect would continue spinning and ride through these momentary outages. Okay? So we protected the data that way. Then we also had disk drives, and we would back up from one disk drive to another disk drive. And back then, some of the disk drives made by IBM were called Winchester disk drives, like the gun manufacturing company. And that's because it was an IBM Model 3030 disk drive. So it was called a Winchester, because Winchester made a rifle chambered in 3030. And then we took those disk drives and we backed them up to tape, and we stored them off-site so that if something happened to the building, it would be okay. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of problems with trying to destroy data, the mainframe, the disk drives, and the off-site tape files. We'll be right back. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Mark has been holding. He's in Illinois. Mark, I have a quick question for you. I have been asked, people have called the farmhouse and your name comes up. They bring up your name, and they want to know, who is Mark? Who is Mark?
Who is Mark? Well, I would just say that, I got called in the ministry many years ago when I was stationed at Area 51, and I told you what happened there, Edwards Air Force Base. But I was called as a prophet, and it's the ministry, that God chose for me, and He appointed me to. And there's a great responsibility, because with that comes identity. And the identity is, who is the Anglo-Saxon, who is the Druid, Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian, Celtic kindred people who are the British Commonwealth, who is Ephraim, the firstborn son, and Manasseh, America. And that's the identity. And then there's a responsibility of taking that truth to the world. And I know Guineith has that truth. And I just encourage her to take it more, because our Zionist enemies hate that truth more than anything else in the world. And then we have our destiny, and we have a destiny. And we know that there's a people who want to take the kingdom of God by force. And they'll do anything at murdering our people, who are Israel. And, I will say that I am from the house of David, of the royal house of Israel, of the house of Jacob, of the tribe of Benjamin. And that's who I am. And I'm a man that just wants people to know the truth. And I want people to know the truth, and that's what it's all about.
Okay. Guineith, any comments?
Okay. I should just point out here that Isaacs is a nom de plume. It's not my real surname. But even my real surname, my married surname, is a variation on Isaacs, but it's actually Mac Isaac, okay? Just for anyone out there, the Mac Isaacs are not Jewish. They are descended from a fellow, his name was Isaac MacDonald, several hundred years ago in Scotland, and he fell in love with a Campbell woman. The Campbells and the MacDonalds were at war, so they moved to a remote part of the country, and he changed his name from Isaac MacDonald to Donald MacIsaac, and that was the ancestor of all the MacIsaacs. And so it was a bit of Scottish cunning rather than any Jewish ancestry that led. I used to think we were a Jewish family. I really did. But I studied the history of it, and I found about Isaac MacDonald, and that he was the ancestor of the MacIsaacs. And I will have to say this. I will have to learn Welsh, and I will have to learn Hebrew to see if there is anything to this linguistic link that you say that there is, okay? Because, I work as a psychic. I have the second sight, but I also trained as a scientist. And so anything that I see in my otherworld work, or anything that I hear of in my otherworld work, I like to go and verify it in the real world if I can, okay? So I'm going to set myself a project where I'm going to learn Welsh and I'm going to learn Hebrew to see if they are, in fact, linguistically linked. And it's a similar project to one that my dad did many years ago. Somebody told him that the Russian language came from the ancient Greek language. Now, he already knew ancient Greek. And so he went and he learnt the Russian language, and he was able to verify that that was, in fact, the case, because he was able to draw linguistic links between the two. And I would like to do that project, if you don't mind, and I will report the outcomes back to you. And I'm actually really glad that you called, because I've been thinking about this for a while, And I said, I must mention that the next time I'm talking to him on air. Because, I don't know, maybe there is something to it. But we'll have to see.
Gwyneth, could I add this about the Greeks, is that the Greek culture started from the Hebrews because there was no Greek. There was no Greece. The people who came from the Exodus during the time of Moses, they went to the main island called Kronos, and Kronos means Hebrew. And the main island in Greece, there's a certain scroll there that shows the Exodus and crossing the Red Sea. And this is where the Greek Empire, this is where the Greek culture started. They were Hebrews. And that's who started Greek culture.
I can't comment there because, like I say,
in the ancient city of Troy during the time of King David, they were the tribe of Dan. They were the Teutha Dadanan.
Yeah, I would have to go and investigate the languages in order to verify this, because, and like I say, you may well be right, but I can't agree or disagree because I don't know Hebrew and I don't know Welsh. But Dunnan is, in Gaelic, it means the people of the earth. Dunnan was the earth goddess. I know that because it's in Gaelic.
Oh, I think you could find all of the information in the museum in London.
Okay. Well, like I say, I've wanted to learn Welsh for a while, anyway, because it keeps coming across my path, the Welsh language, and so I'm going to learn it, and it shouldn't be too difficult for me because it is. I know that it's quite closely linked with Scottish Gaelic. That Scottish Gaelic is, or Gaelic. They're like first cousin languages. They're like English and German. So if you already know English, then German's a fairly easy language to learn, and vice versa, because they're quite closely linked linguistically. And so I'm going to learn Welsh. It's probably a process that might take a year or two. So I can't report anything, quickly, but I'll try and learn Hebrew at the same time, but I don't want to overstretch myself. So this is a project that could keep me going for the next 4 or 5 years to learn both languages, especially given the fact that Hebrew has its own alphabet. So
Guineith and Mark,
yeah.
We've got another caller on the line who's been patiently waiting. So, Mark, I want to say thank you for calling. I appreciate it, and thank you for sharing. Who is Mark in Illinois?
I just want to share this real quick here. There's a book here by the story of Kelto, Two Saxon Israel, by W.H. Bennett, and Bennett is Bennett. You need to get that book, because it's printed by Covenant House in London, and you can get it. I'm sure you can find it on the internet. But that is a good book, and you probably know a lot of that information. But try getting that book, okay?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate the call.
Okay, God bless.
David in Illinois, welcome.
Hey, how you guys doing? Hey, Dane, I want to say real quick, thanks, Gwyneth, for letting me talk on your show last week. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's all right. You've got a very, very interesting story, and I've got friends who have got similar stories.
I got a lot more to tell later, but anyway, I went to bring up this on your show a long time ago, and I did talk about this on another show in the evening that they went into a lot of detail about with them, but not as much on yours. So you guys brought up 9/11. Okay. Like I told you before, my dad wound up going to the federal side. The month before 9/11 happened, they had, he said, something's going to happen. Something's going on. He said, we got guys in black suits coming out here with no insignias on. He said, they're teaching us how to storm, communities, door to door, tear them down, take them in. They were using MP5s and assault shotguns with multiple barrels. And he said, I never seen nothing like this since I was in the military. He said, this is just not right. Something's going on. Well, then he got a call. I was supposed to go, and one of my family members worked for American Airlines at the time, too. They were going to use those family, tickets to get me to go down there. And I wasn't getting on no plane, but I finally told my dad I was going to get on a plane. He says, don't. I don't know what's going on. Something's going on. Don't get on the plane. And then he told me about the 5 guys he followed around the dam. He managed, they were Arabs. He said, but they were going in and out of secure areas down below. And he caught 3 of them. And he watched 2 of them go in secure areas, and they were taking pictures of the structures inside in classified areas. He took them out to the federal holding area they had out there in the desert, and he was talked to by the director.
Was this at Area 51?
They think this was one of the areas that he worked at, and I didn't realize I had a card that's dated 1989. He told me a lot of stuff about that place, too. I'll get into that stuff later at some other time, but he was told 3 times he checked to let them guys go, give them their cameras back. He says, I can't believe it. And he later, when he met with his other federal buddies, he said, we got them under surveillance. Something's going on. You're to let them go. Mm-hmm. And then the 9/11 happened. And he said, I guess the dam was too important. He didn't even think nothing about it, but he said 3 of those guys that he seen were on that list. They were pictured. He knew about it before they even were on TV.
You're talking about the ones involved in the flying of the airplanes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be right back. David, stay with us. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. David is with us in Illinois. And David, you came up with some very interesting discussion items. And I just want our class to know that you have scheduled time to be back with us. I'm not going to say what that time is, but soon you will be back with us. You have it on your calendar. I have it on mine. And I don't want anything to happen to you, so I'm not going to mention exactly when you're going to be back, but you will. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with us, David?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he notified me about, right when the crash happened, he said, I bet you the guys that I pulled in was ordered to let go and give them back all their cameras. He said, I couldn't believe it. And he said, I bet you they're on the plane. And he knew they were on there before they even came up. Now, here's the thing that gets me afterwards. You know, me and him, I had to deal with his phone calls. We'd argue about this stuff all the time because there's right and there's wrong. And he always tried to tell me there's things you just got to let go along with it. And it just, you look the other way. Well, then they ordered him to arrest anybody of Arab descent. And he said, what do I charge him for? Nothing. What do I do with him? We gave you a big holding area down here in the basement. Lock them up. He said, how long? Indefinitely. He said, I'll be glad to do it. You sign off on it. You're not going to burn me for this. Yeah, I can't just do this much. And they refused to sign off on it. And I said, would you have done it? He goes, yeah. If I was ordered to do it, it's not my place. I'd have done it.
Wow.
And that's what's sad. He always said, look, I showed you. You've been around. You know what happens. You just got to look the other way. He said, why won't you learn that? And I'm like, it's wrong. I'm not changing my view on it.
That is absolutely wrong.
David,
by the way, with this language project, I've got it mapped out, all right? This is going to be a project that's probably going to take a few years. I'm going to learn Welsh. Okay, I already know Scottish Gaelic. I'm going to learn Welsh. And then for a control pair, I'm going to learn both Hebrew and Arabic. Okay? And then we will see if, because Hebrew and Arabic, we know they're linked linguistically because Isaac and Ishmael were brothers. Okay, so those 2 languages are definitely linked. Okay, and from the little bit of Hebrew and the little bit of Arabic I know they're linked. And then Welsh and Gaelic, I know are linked. Okay, because of the bit of, they both come from Gal, who came from Kazakhstan in ancient times. there was a group that came across and settled in Britain, and they became the Welsh, and then the rest of them didn't come and settle there for about, maybe another 200 or 300 or 400 years. And then the main group came across, saw their friend, realised that they were already there, and then moved on to Ireland. Okay? Now, that's beside the point. But that is really disgusting about, that they would get somebody just because they were Arabic and lock them up. Yeah, that's just not on.
They would fill them up, and this was in a restricted area in the desert. And there has to be some validity.
There has to be grounds, otherwise it's habeas corpus.
Yeah. What I said, because I said it on another radio show when they quizzed me about a lot of this, and there was a lot of federal activity after that. I knew there was even activity around us, but I know it was because of me. I know it was because of me, because my dad said if I ever talked about this, they would say and describe me in a certain way, and they did.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say what
kidnapping.
That is. and
to imprison people without cause.
Can I ask you a question real quick? I don't know anything news-wise about those planes. Did any of them planes come from Dallas?
I don't know.
I don't know. I won't watch the stuff.
I think they all came from JFK.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit more relieved.
David, you mentioned the dam. Can you make sure that we all understand which dam you're talking about?
Oh, Hoover Dam. There's a picture of it with the American flag.
Hoover, isn't it?
Yeah.
The big one.
That'd be really hard to fix.
He said the concrete's still curing underneath it.
That's correct.
What he told me.
And there are bodies in the concrete as well. Okay, we'll be right back. David, I want to thank you for being with us. I've got some things that Guineith has to discuss. Thank you for being with us. So, Guineith, you and I were talking on the telephone about England. And at one time, England had a republic. And we were talking about why that happened and why it reverted back to the monarchy. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah. The thing is, with England, back about 400 years ago, give or take a few decades, okay, they had a king who basically drove the country into a massive, massive, massive deficit. And his name was called Charles I. And the whole economy was suffering. And you had these new revolutionary ideas were beginning to circulate in Europe. And they're the same ideas that eventually would lead to the French Revolution and the American Revolution. But they sort of got a hold a bit earlier in England than they did in either of those two countries. And so basically the English people decided that they would get together and that they would have their own republic. And so they went up to the palace and they arrested the king. They held him in prison for a while and then they beheaded him. And that was Charles I. And they said, well, what sort of a structure are we going to have? And they said, oh, well, we've still got the House of Commons. We'll have Parliament. And that's how we will make our decisions. And the House of Lords, I'm not sure if that was still around or not. I don't think that it sort of was so powerful if it was there. Okay? And you know, a lot of the noble lords, they were not in agreement with this because, you know, what happened was after they'd cut Charles I's head off, they sort of began looking around to see who else's head they could cut off. And it could very easily have gone into a French-style reign of terror from there on in. But instead they decided to impose taxation and on these noble lords to impoverish them, because many of these lords had estates, massive estates. They would own all the villages in their district. They would own all the houses and all the villages. So if you wanted to live there, you had to rent from the lord, from the noble lord. Okay, and what had happened is, the Parliament made all these red tape regulations where if you didn't dot every I and cross every T, then you get a fine. Okay? And a lot of them were really, really stupid regulations. This is beginning to sound familiar, Vincent. And it was a deliberate plan to do the landowners out of their estate so that the government would get a hold of people's land. And they had a tax on windows and a tax on fireplaces. And they banned Christmas, they banned Easter, they banned birthday parties. In fact, they banned parties full stop, which the English had a bit of a problem with because it was actually through holding balls or basically, parties where you'd hire out a hall and get several hundred of your best friends together and spend the night dancing and eating good food. That's how the young people got to meet their spouses, okay? And without any large balls, the young people of the nobility had nowhere to meet. And they couldn't meet appropriate marriage partners, and it was a hindrance for them. Now, they thought that they would get rid of the nobles by getting rid of their land. It didn't quite work out that way because these nobles only knew how to do a small number of things. They knew how to manage a large estate, and they knew how to go hunting, and they knew how to go to war. Once they didn't have a large estate anymore, the list of the things that they knew how to do were go hunting and go to war, and so they combined those two talents. And by hunting, I don't just mean going out and plinking stags or whatever, although they used to do that as well. What they used to do is they used to ride at high speeds across country on horseback, over fences, through valleys, up and down hillsides, jumping over creeks and ditches, all at absolutely breakneck galloping speeds. This is the sort of hunting, and often with about 40 or 50 dogs trailing behind them as well. And they would all get together, there would be about 30 or 40 of them, and they'd all ride along together at breakneck speeds with, all their dogs with them. And they'd hunt foxes or they'd hunt some other animal, in this way. So they were used to riding around at very, very high speeds, including jumping, including up and down hillsides, including over ditches, and so on. They took those two skills of knowing how to go to war and knowing how to hunt, and they turned highwaymen. So the crown, or not the crown, the Cromwellian Republic didn't do away with the nobles. It just deprived them of their means of income, so they had to find some other way to make money, and they did it by robbing everyone, the nobles. They became highwaymen. And so Cromwell actually created the enormously unsafe conditions on the British roads during the English Republic and the English Civil War. And in fact, some of these highwaymen, and if you want to read about this in the Gentleman of Fortune's Weekly News, you can subscribe to the Gentleman of Fortune's Weekly News because I've been writing essays on this lately, haven't I, Vincent? James Hind. James Hind was a royalist highwayman, and he would go around, and his list of victims reads like a who's who of the Roundhead, that's the Republican regime in England at that time, including that he accosted the very judge who had sentenced Charles I to death. And basically, he held a gun to his heart and demanded he stand and deliver. And when he just produced a coin purse of silver, he swore that if he wouldn't, produce a coin of another species, that he'd shoot him through the heart. And so he quickly produced a bag of gold, and James Hind gave him a lecture on the evils of the parliamentary regime and then let him go. But at another time, he and his partner in their gang, Thomas Allen and James Hind in their gang, actually held up the coach of Oliver Cromwell himself, who had fashioned himself the High Protector of England. And, you know, it was that failed because he had a pretty good bodyguard. He was the head of state, but they probably meant to assassinate him. And this was a problem all the way through the Civil War, until Oliver Cromwell inevitably died. We all get old, we all die. And then they decided that instead of having another Lord High Protector, that they would get Prince Charles back from France, where he was in exile. Oh, and James Hind actually helped Prince Charles to escape to France. And that's actually what he was sentenced to death for. He was sentenced to be hung, drawn, and quartered because he had facilitated the escape of Prince Charles, who became Charles II. You know, so that's quite interesting. But afterwards, okay, the English, after they got the king back, they had a bit of a problem because they had to do away with all the taxes, the window taxes, the chimney taxes, and all the red tape. I was going to say the blue tape. Probably blue tape as well. You know what blue tape is? Fraudulent infringement notices, broken tail lights. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what blue tape is. So I just invented that word now, by the way. But anyway, they had a bit of a problem then because the country was going into deficit. Because as well as he was a king, but he liked to party, Charles II, and the rest of the country was so fed up after decades and decades and decades of no partying, they all wanted to party as well. And so what happened was there was not only a new generation of highwaymen came in from France who were the footmen of all the English nobility who all returned home, who all turned highwaymen because they needed to generate money to keep their lifestyle. You know, the old royalist highwaymen were still around, but then you had the new French highwaymen. But then after that, Charles II realized that he would need another source of revenue, and so he basically set up a system of privateering where he was issuing letters of marque to sailors in the Caribbean so that they could go and rob the ships of the French and go and rob the ships of the Dutch and the Spanish. And some of that revenue would end up making its way back to England. So basically Charles II set up, to a large degree, the pirates of the Caribbean, and he did so to line his own pockets. And the government really hasn't changed that much, Vincent, because guess what? The government's still doing the same thing today. And Charles II, at one time, had the King of Spain come to him and complain about all the piracy in the Caribbean because he really thought that, you know, Henry Morgan was a bad guy. And in a lot of ways he was, because he sacked Portobello and tortured the Panamanians. He sacked Panama and tortured them brutally. And the King of Spain didn't like that, so he complained to Charles II, and Charles II called Henry Morgan back to England and said, the Spanish tell me that you're a pirate. To which Henry Morgan responded, well, yes, they would, wouldn't they? They don't like the English very much. And they all laughed, and the end result of that was that Charles II knighted him and appointed him Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. And he went back to the Caribbean and lived out the rest of his life there, another 7 years as Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, and died in his own bed, a peaceful death.
Hold that thought. Plus, I've got some good news. There's a cell phone tower on a school campus which was suspected of causing students cancer.
Oh, man.
And the parents were absolutely frosted, and they fought with it for years. But the school was receiving a payment from the owner of the cell phone tower. Okay? And this is what happens. Schools are inundated with electromagnetic radiation. These stupid technology people in the school systems think that wireless is where it's at. So they will put these wireless access points in the classrooms, in the computer labs, in the hallways, everywhere, so you can get Wi-Fi. And that's what they do.
Oh, my gosh.
And they have no idea what they're doing. Or, well, I believe many are ignorant, many are stupid. And I'm starting to use that word stupid more and more, because that's what I think they are. Well, in this particular school system, in the Weston Elementary School in Ripon, California, 4 children have been diagnosed with cancer. 4 young children. And the school system is saying, well, you know, there's no evidence. No evidence
That's so sad.
Right. Well, the parents won. The parents won because they gave the school administration so much flack that they're now taking that tower down. So, class, it can be done.
What you need to do?
It's really difficult.
You know what you need to do if you're in a school system like that? You need to write to the school, and you need to say, I claim UCC 1-308, okay? I am withdrawing my child from the school. You're a private corporation. I don't have to consent to contract with you. I do not consent to contract with you. And if you persist in harassing me into trying to force me to contract with you, you will get sued under UCC 1-308. Could you look up quickly what UCC 1-308 means?
Sure. Sure.
I'm pretty sure that's the right UCC. It should be all rights reserved.
Performance or acceptance under yes. UCC 1-308. Performance or acceptance under reservation of rights. A party with explicit reservation of rights performs or promises performance or assents to performance in a manner demanded or offered by another party does not thereby prejudice the rights reserved.
Yeah. In other words, all rights reserved. That means you have the right to not send your children to school. And you can turn around and say to the school, if you persist in harassing me, sending CPS, whatever, CPS and you and whoever else is involved, the police, the local, sheriff or whoever, you're all going to get sued under UCC 1-308.
But they don't worry about that.
Back off.
They don't worry about that unless they don't worry about that unless they feel they're going to be individually sued.
Yes. So you need to individually sue the principal, the sheriff that turns up. If CPS turns up, you need to get the name of the worker. You need to sue them individually. Okay? And go for the bosses. Go for the bosses and for the workers on the front line. Say, I want the name of your supervisor and their address for the service of legal documents.
Well, I know what's going to happen next. I know what's going to happen next. People throughout the entire country are going to take aim at those cell towers. They're going to take aim at them. And I mean that literally.
Yep. It's people are just about at breaking point. They really, really are. We're not advocating that people go and do that, by the way.
Right. I'm just saying it. That's a natural. That's a natural progression of things.
That's something that's going to happen.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I can see that that's going to happen because people are losing it, and they are surrounded with spying technology. They're being fried with electromagnetic radiation, and they're going to do some crazy things. And I believe that the natural fallout of this is some of the crazy things that they're going to do is they're going to drive their cars into places where they want to take out their aggression. I'm not advocating it. I can just see it happen, as well as plinking. Class, thank you very much for being with us. Above all, honesty and integrity.